Now that we have understood what is urbanization, its features, and various theories given by Indian and Western thinkers regarding urbanization, as well as the broad relationship between industrialization and urbanization, it is high time we talk about certain features of Indian urbanization, which talks about how did urbanization begin in India. How is it different from the pattern of urbanization that broadly took place in the Europe and in the other Western countries? Now, talking of Indian urbanization to begin with, there are three things that we always say. So, these are the outline features of Indian industrialization and urbanization. One thing is our urbanization has been regionally imbalanced, which means although a majority part of country and society is now urbanized, but there are certain states which are highly urbanized. There are certain states which are still primarily rural. So we talk about an urbanization that is regionally very varied in nature. Second thing is our urbanization has been very haphazard. When we say haphazard, we mean to say it's very irregular. It happened as a very quick process in response to industrialization. Wherever special economic zones, wherever industries, factories, manufacturing centers were getting created, immediately we saw a town coming up. And hence the town planning is very faulty in India by and large, which explains urban flooding, which explains urban poverty, which also explains lot of road accidents, which explains ecological degradation. Similarly, the third thing that we normally mention about Indian urbanization is that it is a very hasty process. It's a very sudden process. The policymakers and the general public never really had the time to understand and to take it ahead slowly. It just happened as a very quick response, and hence it's a very hasty, regionally imbalanced, and a very haphazard process. It also presents an irony because we talk about a society which began with Mohenjo-daro and Harappan civilization. That's the Indus Valley civilization. Now, one of the oldest urbanized civilizations of the world. Highly sophisticated, highly famous for its town planning. Now, we are talking about the same city. And as a successor of the same Harappan society, today we talk of an urbanization which is faulty in its length and width. So now, let us understand various dimensions of Indian urbanization. To begin with, as I said, it is a very lopsided or a very imbalanced urbanization. But we cannot and should not blame the modern governments or the people at large, because the real blame goes to the colonial government. The way British government introduced industrialization for our society, it was very natural that urbanization will be equally haphazard. They never bothered to create industries in certain remote areas and states. They only created an industrialization based on administrative convenience for the drain of our economy. And hence, from the very beginning, we had certain cities like Madras, Bombay, Calcutta, which were experiencing a heavy population growth. They were also experiencing infrastructural development and connectivity. However, these were not properly linked with the interiors. Plus, there were many interiors which were barely even connected with railways or roadways. And hence, we have huge regional imbalance that is absolutely a legacy of colonial administration. The second thing is normally people say urbanization has to follow industrialization. They are twin processes. But in India, a lot of urbanization had also happened even before industries were set up. We know even during the Mughal and the Mauryan periods, we had the karkhanas, warehouses, we had certain artisans and manufacturers of handicrafts who were engaged in manufacturing. They were also engaged in contributing to Indian handicraft exports. Now, these people were also working in semi urban or semi rural areas. And hence, even before modern industry came, we did have certain cities that had developed, but only those which had some economic activity going on there. Apart from that, there is another very interesting feature of urban growth in India, that it is nothing but an output of poverty. Which kind of poverty? It is absolutely the output of rural poverty and agrarian crisis. We also know that alongside deindustrializing ourselves, Britishers also ruined Indian agriculture and handicraft. We know that they commercialized our agriculture. We know that they killed indigenous handicraft. We also know that they introduced new revenue systems which were very heavy and unbearably exploitative on the peasants and on the agriculture, laborers and small farmers. And hence, agriculture was not sustainable anymore. As an alternative, even the handicraft industry was ruined in the face of British manufactured products, in the face of this unbalanced or imbalanced competition. Because of that, the rural people had no place to go. Neither could agriculture sustain them anymore, nor could they find absolute employment in the industry. So, what happened to them? They really became the rural urban migrants who became nothing but just urban slum dwellers, urban poor, urban migratory laborers. So, that also created Indian urban spaces. Apart from that, since Indian urbanization was a result of massive immigration into cities from the rural areas, Indian urbanization also represents a very ugly face of slums, ghettoization, unauthorized settlements, poor sanitation, heavy population on a given density of land, which means a high density of population. Apart from that, massive income inequality, poverty, and diseases. And hence, Indian urbanization doesn't present a very bland picture as such. Apart from that, normally people say that the reason behind urbanization is pull factor. Pull factor are all those factors which encourage people or which pull people into the cities. The dream of a better job, the dream of a better life, the dream of enjoying good social infrastructure like good education, good health, and sound transportation facilities, good connectivity, good sanitation. That's what attracts people a high income, a better quality of life. Now, these are all pull factors. But very unfortunately, in India, the real cause behind urbanization is not these pull factors, but its opposite, the push factors. Here, the push factors are more prominent because rural India never really continued to be sustainable. We know that with degradation of agricultural land, also, after Green Revolution, the phenomena of people migrating into cities really increased because Green Revolution was a very short-term benefit. In the long run, it introduced not just soil alkalinity like in Punjab, but also soil toxicity like in Bihar, Maharashtra, and various other regions. Because of heavy usage of pesticides and fertilizers and all these chemicals, because of excessive amount of groundwater pollution, because of poor farmers not being able to use or purchase heavy machinery, high yielding variety crops, and expensive medications, because of poor supply chains, because of poor market linkages and lack of awareness. We know that Indian agriculture could not fill the stomach of many people. We know that farmers' suicides are very common in India. Yeah. And hence push factors here become more prominent. The disguised unemployment and the seasonal nature of unemployment that really characterizes our rural economy was the push factor that made people immigrate into cities in a very large number. Now, it's very sad again that people believe that once they leave the village and they enter the cities, they will get a better job. But sadly, most of these people who are migrating are either unskilled or semi skilled. So, now what is really going on is that unemployment is changing its shape from rural, seasonal, and disguised unemployment. People are not getting anything, but they are experiencing a newer kind of unemployment that is underemployment, structural unemployment, and vulnerable unemployment. So, just the unemployment is changing its shape. Nothing else is happening. There is no prosperity associated with urban areas as such. In fact, in the face of competition and a very formal society, in the words of Emile Durkheim again, the breakdown of rural mechanical solidarity, many of these people become delinquents, they become a part of crime rackets, they give in into alcoholism, gambling, prostitution, and drug abuse and other such deviant behaviors because of severe poverty. And hence, it is said that Indian urbanization is also a product of distress migration. Now, we also need to talk about the South and the North paradox here. Now, people normally believe that although the population and the density of population is much higher in North India, the reason being that when we talk about the Bimaru state belt, which is comprised of Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and similarly, say, certain parts of Odisha. So these are all the states which are not very prosperous in the real sense. Now, these are states where fertility rate is still very, very high as compared to the national average fertility rate or as compared to the total fertility rate of 2.1, which is also the replacement level fertility, the perfect desired rate. So it is much higher than that. These Bimaru states are still characterized by 2.8, 2.9 kind of fertility. Also, their performance in terms of economic development, industrialization, better income inequality, education, primary health, it's still very poor. And hence, these states are also known as low performing states. We know there is a massive regional and state dichotomy in India when you talk about social economic development. So, these are all low performance states. Okay. Now, in these low performance states, what really happens is that the population is growing very, very fast owing to various factors like poverty. The other day, I also explained to you that the poorest segment of society will always have the highest fertility rate because of two reasons. One is that they are highly insecure, that their children will die, they will not live beyond 6 years because these segments are unfortunately also characterized by a very high degree of infant and child mortality owing to poor nourishment, poor vaccination, poor awareness, early pregnancy, very poor access to family planning. So hence they will always have a high fertility rate. Now given this and the belief that the more children you have, the more money you will earn. Earning hands theory. So these factors combined, all these North Indian states, which we refer to as low performing states, they have a very high fertility rate even today. But the paradox is that despite having a very high population rate, the level of urbanization is still very less as compared to the South Indian or Peninsular Indian states. Now, what explains this South North paradox? That despite a high rate of population growth and a better density of population, more migration to cities, why do we say that South Indian is still way more urban as compared to the North Indian region? A very natural reason seems to be that the growth of rural settlements in North India is high as compared to South India. Say, for example, in South India, a natural result of poor agriculture was increase in urban population. No wonder these are certain states which also have a very good climate as compared to North India. Most of peninsular Indian states have a climate that's way more moderate as compared to the extreme heat and the extreme cold that North India experiences during the winter and the summer season. Because of that, it was much easier for various companies to come and settle down here. They attracted more urban population. They attracted more FDI. They attracted more special economic zones. Because of that, the level of urbanization in South happened to be way higher. Another prominent reason could be the level of educational attainment. Now, not only is Kerala a state with 100% literacy, but also many other peninsular Indian states claim of a very high literacy rate. People were therefore more inclined to move towards urban areas and find some job there. Rural was not the only option they had to live with. As opposed to that, North India is a region still characterized by a lower degree of higher education, or for that matter, even basic skill. Because of that, the migration into urban areas did not seem very likely. Hence, if there is less industrialization, if there is less economic opportunity, then what really happened as a result of high population? Expansion of village areas and not really the creation of a town. That was one thing that we understand here. Now, with this, a lot of people also question that how did the 1991 new economic policy, which led to liberalization, privatization, and globalization. How did it impact the urban process of India? Or rather, how did it impact urbanization in India? Did it speed up urbanization or did it actually did nothing to spur urban growth? So now here talking of globalization, the phenomena under which various economies are experiencing integration, there is a better trade of goods and services. Apart from that, there is more migration of people. And you know that whenever people migrate, along with them, their culture migrates too. Not just non material aspects, but also material aspects. So everything is migrating, and hence people are sharing common values, and that's the kind of globalization we talk about, which is very social economic globalization. It experiences culture homogenization. It experiences borrowing of culture. Plus, also, it is about trading and migration of people. Now, in this kind of globalization, naturally, urbanization was impacted heavily. For example, if you talk about the Kundu and Gupta 2000 theory, it says globalization has not only created urbanization, but it has also made the lives of urban poor very, very miserable. It has impacted them in a very bad way. Although there is a massive expansion of material culture, for example, when you have a better foreign direct investment coming, like India was creating a bullet train with the help of Japan. India has created so many special economic zones and corridors with the help of United States or from the help of UK. So a lot of FDI means much better, faster and sophisticated development. It is very visible when you talk about infrastructure, smart technology, the business tech parks, and a very, very investment friendly culture. We also talk about smart city. Now, remember the smart city mission of India in 2015, which talk about creating much better facilities in satellite cities, sensor system to be used in traffic, much better connectivity, metro trains everywhere, better hospitals, better green spaces in the city, much more smart technology being given to the traffic management police in order to create a safe and a healthy and a very, very techno oriented city. Now, India also has certain cities which are growing on the pattern of, say, Singapore or Helsinki, or for that matter, Zurich. So the impact has been very, very dual. On the one hand, material culture definitely has experienced massive growth. But on the other hand, when you talk of the non material culture, well, this presents a problem. Because I've always told you that culture lag is the cause of a majority of problems which societies face. Because culture has this tendency, while material culture develops very fast, non material aspects of culture do not grow in the same pace. They always are lagging behind, which creates a situation where the people of society are not able to catch up with this increasing fast material culture. And the ones who are left behind become characterized by digital divide, loss of identity, conflict, ethnic violence, and all these things develop normally. So something similar has happened in India as well. Now, talking of liberalization, government has been acting as a facilitator or as a catalyst to urban growth. Not like the government is coming and providing you cities or creating them, but the government is definitely encouraging more investment from abroad and from Indian private sector to come and develop cities on model lines. Now, the Sponge City mission that is envisaged in India after being inspired by Beijing, China. Or, for example, you talk about the Shenzhen model. So, what is happening really? We are getting inspired by the Western and the more advanced model of urban growth, and the government is facilitating this also. We can talk about the Amrut mission, we can talk about the JNNURM mission, we can talk about the Swachh Bharat mission. So, in multiple ways, the government is providing for better urban development, calling for more and more people from across the globe, from the private sector, to come and invest in Indian urban growth. But again, the problem seems to be inequality. So UN, United Nations also talks about right to city. It's again a component of UN Habitat. It says right to city is a very, very important and a fundamental right which all urban dwellers have. Every person belonging to city, irrespective of caste, class, gender, race, religion, or any other reason, their physical ability. They all have a right to enjoy the material aspects of city life. They should have an access to infrastructure, but sadly that doesn't happen. And in the words of Deshpande and Deshpande in 1990, the benefits of this urbanization have only been reaching the ones who are in a stronger position to enjoy them. Rather, it is only reaching the ones who are the elite of the society. How about the slum dwellers and the people who are working in the unorganized sector? So for them, it is just a remote dream. And when we talk about another facet of LPG, that's privatization. Once the economy was liberalized, it simply meant that more and more private investment and more private companies were allowed to grow, which also had its own benefits. For example, when you talk about IBM providing solution for smart cities, when you talk about companies like TCS and many other such organizations contributing to not only generating Aadhaar cards for people but also helping in the passport making process, investing in creating connectors or escalators on the highways or on the main arterial roads we say that there is a very good resource mobilization that's happening in terms of electricity provision, in terms of better connectivity, private transportation. So people are enjoying these fruits of urban life. At the same time, the real estate sector has also benefited. There are private companies which have created massive layouts, massive business parks, tech parks. So it just improves the quality of urban life and adds convenience to the lives of people. So all in all, the result of LPG was a massive expansion and benefit in terms of material culture, that we need to agree. But at the same time, if you talk about its cultural and social impacts, as I said, the non material culture, then things are not as smooth as they seem. Because people were not able to catch up with this rapid pace of urbanization. Now, why? For example, there is a study of 1964 by I.P. Desai who talks about small town Mahua in Gujarat state. So, what is really observed is that it is not proper to assume that urbanization always leads to breakdown of joint family. Urbanization always creates the Western kind of nuclear family model because, as I said, culture lag still dominates. People are somewhere caught between this painful social change. In the words of Emile Durkheim, people are almost caught in a kind of economic situation where the society is breaking down its traditional culture. But still, completely new culture has not come in. In a way, we are all caught up in between and we are following this hybrid culture, which is not completely Indian anymore and not completely Western yet. So we are still evolving in the process somewhere in between. For example, in this town, he observes that barely 5% families were nuclear, as opposed to the popular belief that urbanization and privatization and globalization will always lead to a crumbling of joint family model. Similarly, he says that although urban families are changing, they are becoming slightly more small, fragmented, but still individualism is not that prominent. People still experience the kinship and the pressure from family ties. They are still very attached to their families. Properties generally in the agriculture sector, the land ownership is still very, very joint. And although people have to live in a nuclear way because they need to live in cities and work there, but still, heart and heart, they are very, very close to their basic native family structure. So that's an interesting observation. Similarly, Aileen Ross in 1962 also undertook a study of literally more than 150 Hindu families who were all the middle and the urban upper class middle families in Bengaluru. And they discovered that about 60% families are nuclear, which means in a bigger city like Bengaluru, which is highly urban and cosmopolitan, the chances of nuclearization is much higher. Naturally, because majority people are engaged in the IT profession, which means that also the cost of living in Bengaluru would be very, very high. And a lot of older generation people are not comfortable leaving behind their village, their mechanical solidarity kind of existence, their land, their property, and immediately come to reside in the urban areas. Plus, since the cost of living is higher, generally people only live with their primary kins here. So maybe in cities like Bengaluru, it's much easier for people to break away from traditional joint structure and come to inhabit in a nuclear model. And hence, we also generalize that small joint family is now a typical form of family in most urban Indian spaces. But what do you really mean by a small joint family? Now, again, it is a combination of a situation where the joint family broke because people who were living here in the villages migrated into the cities. So, due to migration and due to the impact of Western culture, whatever, the joint family broke and it was already trying to convert into a small nuclear family. But given that our traditions and our values are still rooted in kinship ties, these families would never become pure nuclear families like in the West. And hence, this small joint family corresponds to another word, which we call as the extended family model. It is somewhere in between both of these. It means husband, wife, their children, and maybe the older parents, or maybe some very close relative, or maybe the unmarried kids of the wife or the husband. So, which means nuclear family plus three or four more relatives living together. So, not typically joint, but at the same time, not completely nuclear. And this explains when I told you, we are living in a situation of cultural hybrid. All our social institutions today are a product of social change. You could talk of family, which is extended, neither joint nor nuclear. We could talk about culture, which is neither completely global nor local, so therefore it's global. We could talk about food, which is literally half traditional and half comprised by Western elements. We could talk about language, where we are using Hindi English today in a majority parts of India. So which is not really the native completely and not really English. It's a mix of both. And hence today our culture is totally a hybridized culture. That's a very prominent result of urbanization. A study done by Kapadia in 1915 highlights that in rural Gujarat still for every two nuclear families there are three joint families, which means joint families are more prominent still. But if you talk about the urban areas of the same state, then nuclear families were literally 10% higher than the joint family models. So, which means there is also a very big rural urban divide when you talk about the structure of family. But very interestingly, the National Family Health Survey, it talks about something very fascinating. It says during the coronavirus pandemic, a very interesting thing really happened. And what happened was that there are more extended families and even joint families in urban India today. If you talk about the all India average, and in rural India, opposite is happening. The joint family system is completely breaking down, and people are choosing to now live in nuclear families. Now, how interesting is that? And how do you justify that? You can justify it by using the same logic which I have told you, that culture always follows either economics or geography. Here also, economics is the reason why culture changes. For example, today, after pandemic and during the COVID pandemic, people in the urban areas realized that it's very, very difficult to live alone. People were sick, they were experiencing medical crisis, health crisis, and hence they were more dependent now on their kids and relatives. And hence they thought to solve this problem of social insecurity, it's better to live alone. That was one reason. Another reason is urban life is an expensive life with both husband and wife working. Often there is no one to take care of children, and children hence do not get the right socialization and care. And hence it's always better if somebody from your relatives, like your grandparents or your parents, come and live with you, because then they can transmit the cultural values to children easily. Also, it keeps them safe. Besides, it also saves your money of investing in daycare and after school care. You see, so economic reasons have also been responsible for creating this very strange paradox today. Also, in urban area, there is a space crunch. There is already a suffocation. It's claustrophobic. There is barely any scope left for more residential expansion. And hence, the urban spaces are very expensive. Urban life in general is very demanding and competitive. And hence, if many people come and stay together, then a lot of expenses get shared. So, certain times, economic realities also give way to cultural realities and culture changes. So, therefore, for a very long time, joint families broke down and became nuclear. But today, again, after the pandemic scenario and the rising expenses henceforth, this ongoing recession that we are experiencing today, the world over, triggered more specifically by the Russia Ukraine war, we can definitely say that again the new phenomena is that nuclear families are going back to their extended and joint model. So, you see, this is how society deals with economic and geographical crisis. So, we can't say culture is permanent. To generalize that urbanization will always follow in one direction, it's not the right thing to do. Culture is very flexible, but it always responds to either economic realities or ecological realities. Do remember. Now, if you talk about Sylvia Vartok, who's also a very famous feminine social thinker, she says even when people in India live separately in a nuclear model, the feeling of jointness or the feeling of belongingness to your own group never changes. It is very, very strong. Because joint family or extended family is not about people living together and, cooking and eating in the same place and following the same culture and supporting each other through division of labor. It's not just that. It has a very deep ceremonial unit. I also told you culture always has a symbolic value. For example, to an outsider who doesn't know Indian society, maybe an idol of a god will not mean anything. It will just be a small object. But to the person who is revering that object, it is everything. It is divine. Right? Similarly, for a lot of people in India, A lot of communities, things like books, pens, pencils, everything associated with literacy, education, learning is secret again. We would never ever do any kind of disrespectful behavior towards it. But in the eyes of somebody who's coming from an outside alien culture, probably it's very tough to understand. And why would we accord a ritualistic importance to things like pen and notebook while they are only products? So that's the value of culture. Now, culture is only understood by the people of the group. To an outsider, it always doesn't mean anything almost. So therefore, culture has a huge symbolic value, and joint family, as per Sylvia Bartok, has a huge symbolic cultural value for India. Now, in urban India, at the same time, since many people are choosing to go nuclear until a very recent period, we also would say that there is individualism that's rising. Now, it is also very, very unfair to not talk about the state or the government in this case. Because often people don't understand that government itself plays a very crucial regulatory role when it comes to family structure. People say that family structure changes only due to globalization, only because of urbanization, industry, Western culture, but it's also because of government initiatives. For example, when the government says that girls can inherit their parental property just like boys, it already says that. This also means a huge change of family structure, which is essentially very patriarchal. When government says that it is highly suggested and recommended that women take up higher education and they work. And the government promotes women through giving them reservations. Say in Panchayat, one third of seats are reserved for them. See, for example, when the government says that we will give free daycares for all the working mothers in IT sector, or we shall provide working women hostels at a cheap rate so that women are able to stay in newer areas and work. So family structure does change. When the government says dowry is not a good practice, when the government says have a smaller family, have a two-child family, it's good for you, it's good for society. When the government talks about a better family welfare program, what happens? The attitude and the mindset towards family also changes because it leads to empowerment of women. Now, with women empowerment, what also happens is that the typical traditional division of labor of joint agrarian family undergoes a change. Because if women is working, a lot of family structure undergoes a change. And this also is a major reason why urbanization has created a change of family structure in India. Today's families are not just very, very small, but they are also very individualistic and they are very, very global in their thought. They believe in the homogenized value of the entire world rather than just their own tradition because they are impacted by social media because they also have things like GIG platforms and other spaces to work online, which means they have better work flexibility. So the position of women will also determine how much and to what degree will family change, not only in structure but also in function. And hence, Milton Singer in 1968 observes that a modified version of Indian joint family is consistent with rural and urban setting, which means if there is industry and urbanization, the typical traditional Indian joint family is bound to change. But do remember, never just write that it is changing. As a student of sociology, you must always write it is changing functionally plus structurally. I have explained to you earlier as well. Structure is about becoming nuclear from joint. You can also explain the COVID paradox that again from joint to extended. And functionally means how it has changed from unit of production to a unit of consumption also. It has changed from a self-sufficient unit to a highly specialized unit. This, if you write your answer, is absolutely complete. Now, does urbanization also impact caste system? A very interesting and a very, very expected question. Because not just here in sociology, but also in your GS paper too, you can very well have a question. How does urbanization impact caste? Do we have caste system in urban India? Was the force of industry and urbanization able to kill or remove caste system? What kind of caste system do we have? So here, do remember these stagnant keywords. They will always help you. That in India, our society is extremely a resilient society. It's a very resilient society. What do you mean by resilient? Something which has the capacity to face change without changing itself. Something which is like an elastic. No matter how much you try to change it, but it will never fundamentally change. It's a very, very stubborn and a rigid society. Because although we have major social changes, yes, we don't believe in Brahmanism anymore. We don't say that you're a Brahmin, so you're superior. We don't believe in untouchability, it's a crime now. We don't believe in giving people occupations based on their castes anymore. We don't believe in the strict rules of Gotra marriage, Pind marriage, or caste endogamy anymore. We also don't believe in systems like sati, dowry, and things like those anymore. We don't believe in them. But at the same time, we have experienced changes, but all these changes, what we are experiencing, are very, very superficial changes. They only impact us to a certain level, but beyond this, they do not penetrate because we are a resilient society, and hence always believe that whatever social changes India experiences through modernization, through westernization, through urbanization, industrialization, Sanskritization, globalization, these could be endogenic forces within the society. These could be exogenic forces coming from outside, whatever they be. But still, now please remember this line, it will help you tremendously. Whatever changes we have experienced in our institutions of family, caste, patriarchy, kinship, these are all called in sociology as positional changes, which means very artificial and very limited amount of changes. And our society has not only experienced structural changes, okay, which are deep and permanent. Those kind of changes don't come. Why do I say that? I say that obviously because if you talk of urbanization and caste system, definitely urbanization has changed the traditional caste system. Because urban spaces are secular spaces. Here, people work in modern industries, in factories, in various offices, and they intermingle with each other. So, when caste system tells you that people from a particular caste will not do social interaction with other or outside caste members, a very typical feature of Indian caste system, that is not applicable to urban India at all because these are secular and cosmopolitan spaces. So, not only will you eat, drink, and talk to people from other castes, but you will also engage with people from other religions, races, ethnicities, and nationalities. So, therefore, this way it does impact caste system. Similarly, when people say that caste system says you have to do one fixed occupation. If you're a Brahmin, you will take up priestly activities. If you're the son or the daughter of a Kshatriya, you will take up any kind of military or any kind of paramilitary job. If you are a Vaishya, you will do business, trade, commerce. But if you're a Shudra, then you will do a menial job, for example, like leather making or cobbler or any kind of other slightly humble occupation. Similarly, if you are an outcast, if you are an untouchable, then naturally you will do the scavenging or safai karmachari kind of job. That's the typical caste system, the stereotypical one. But in urban spaces, we absolutely don't see that. Because with urbanization, the village tradition started changing. With urbanization, Western and global impacts began. Now people are not only intermingling but also eating with each other in restaurants, entertaining themselves in PVRs and other game lounges, and they are going to same salons, they are going to same schools, universities, and offices, which means you can't make a rigid caste system here. Similarly, caste system would also say people should marry within their caste, but today, courtesy the Hindu Marriage Act 1955, courtesy the Special Marriages Act 1954, the government allows you to marry anyone, even people from other religions, even people of your religion belonging to the same Gotra. So, all these rules regarding marriages have been broken down by the government. The government is punishing untouchability, which means caste system has experienced a lot of changes in the face of urbanization. Therefore, some people also believe that caste system exists even today. But because of all these forces, there has been some change. What change? I told you, positional change. But to say that because of these changes, caste is not there in urban India. That's a big myth because I told you we are a resilient society. You cannot kill any feature of our society, nor can you kill caste, nor can you kill patriarchy, nor can you kill the joint family, nor can you kill the kinship. You can try, but you can't kill it. It will come back. It's a resilient society. We are a very rigid and a very elastic society. So changes will be there, but very positional, never structural. Now, what way does caste manifest in urban India? To believe that caste has become converted into class is a very big lie because caste and class are coexisting in Indian society. Now, Andre Bede in 1966, very interestingly, he happened to be my professor when I was studying sociology in my master's. And whenever you would speak to him, let alone through his books or through his articles, he would always say that we live in a society which is characterized by certain composition of class structure and certain composition of caste structure. So today what we experience is a rather mixed kind of social stratification system. So here what happens among the very, very rich and the elite people in urban areas, caste matters much less, but class matters. They will give importance to those who have money, power and resources. Similarly, with urbanization, the rigidity of caste and Brahmanism definitely comes down. That we cannot deny. But caste system still exists. How? One, it exists in the form of caste formations in urban India. It exists in the form of caste associations in urban India. It exists in the form of vote bank politics in urban India. And these are the three ways in which caste has proven to be resilient and it still exists in urban India along with class, of course. Now, Kolendra in 1984 observes that there are three kinds of fusions among castes and subcastes. For example, in the newer urban neighborhoods or regions, people from different subcastes and castes often meet each other. Therefore, intercaste marriages also take place, sometimes within the same caste but different subcastes. The rigidity is coming down, sometimes even between the members of different castes. At the same time, modern politics is also encouraging unity of caste members. Why? Because politicians want to unite people on the basis of their caste, also divide people on the basis of their caste. They would say that as upper caste members, you stays united, and as lower caste so-called members, you stays united. Because then only they can carry on the vote bank politics and exploit them and play upon their insecurities. So therefore, democratic politics has also only encouraged caste rather than finishing it completely. And hence, according to a lot many thinkers, caste system continues to exist. Caste solidarity may be less in urban areas, but still it is quite prominent. And caste panchayats or khap panchayats, as you call them, the parallel justice systems that we talk about, where members of all powerful upper castes come together and create a kind of law-making body which governs the village life and wherein they can exploit the lower caste members as and when and as much as they like. Also, because this law-making body, which is comprised of generally the topmost and the richest and the landowning castes, is also supported by the police, it is supported by the local MLAs, the local politicians and candidates, and hence they have a very big nexus going on, a combined kind of law structure. It is not legal, but still it is socially acceptable because of the importance of caste system in the village. Now, this reminds me of Ajgar. Ajgar was a very, very famous Khap Panchayat kind of caste formation made by the members of upper caste in the regions of Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan. It meant Ahir, Jat, Gurjar, and Rajputs. So these were all the top-notch castes, and hence together they were able to dominate the members of the lower caste. Now, when you talk about caste association in cities, these are slightly more informal as compared to caste formations. Caste formations are therefore also known as cross caste formations. Here, only the rich people from upper castes come and make a group, and then they try to become politically important and dominate the lower castes. It is a mixed kind of creation. But caste associations are only created by members of one particular caste. It is out and out an example of your caste loyalty, or how much are you actually attached to your caste identity. Here, what happens, members of a caste will contribute money, they will, with this money, they will start temples only for their own castes, hospitals, charity homes, they will arrange for marriages, group marriages, or marriage of poor girls, education of certain people through coaching institutes. So, all these things they will create dharmashalas, hostels, but only for the members of their own castes. They will also promote endogamy by creating caste matrimonies so that members of the same caste do marry within each other. They don't want to lose their caste identity. In India, you have so many of these. All India Vaishya Federation, All India Kshatriya Mahasabha, the Kurmi Mahasabhas, a lot of them. So this also shows that in urban India, caste is very predominant. However, intercaste marriages still exist, but at the same time, as I said, it coexists with rigid caste rules as well. Now, you could also use certain observations of these famous thinkers. Now, since we are putting them here, doesn't mean you need to know all of these. But say, for example, you're talking about caste in urban India, so you should know a couple of important ones, like say Srinivas, Andre Bete. You could talk about the example from Polendra, MS Rao. So these are certain important thoughts that you can highlight just to validate your answer. Now, if you talk about urbanization and how it really impacts women's status, again, it's a very debatable thing. It has impacted them in two ways. It has impacted them positively as well as negatively, both ways. How? To begin with, many women in India migrate from rural to urban settings only because of marriage to live with their husband who's probably working in the cities. Now, here what is happening, a majority of these women are not working because they are looking after the elderly and the children within the family. Because the division of labor is very engendered for a lot of these women. Neither are they highly educated, or never have they really skilled themselves, or never got the opportunity to scale up to the market demand in terms of profession. So, hence, their participation in labor force is quite low. Now, talking about the very high caste women, generally they do white collar jobs like the IT industry or the service industry. You will find them here because they are coming from middle class or educated families, and hence they have some bare minimum education to fill up these jobs. Some of them are highly educated as well. At the same time, when you talk about the lower class or the poor women, they are generally also working because here again the necessity is economic. Only with one member earning, it's very difficult to survive in urban areas. And as I always say, money or economics always gives birth to culture. This economic need for more money creates a culture of working women in the lower classes. But unfortunately, since they belong to the poorer segment, the amount of education and the kind of education or skills that they have is not sufficient to grab a white collar job. And hence, most of these will work in the unorganized sector, which is characterized by a very high degree of casualization of labor and exploitation, let alone poor salary. And hence, they are all victims of vulnerable unemployment. So, that's something we must remember. It is a very mixed impact. Similarly, if you talk about the status of women, there are certain positive changes like urban families mean that since women are competing when they see other women, when they are impacted by the urban way of life, by Western values, global values, social media, they want to upgrade their education status. With easy online education today that's accessible through internet, many women are actually ready to step up their qualification. Many of them, with a given level of education, are willing to apply for GIG platform jobs. Some of them also very good organized sector GIG platform jobs, data entry, and many such occupations. And women are doing it. So, since also the level of education is high, the status is much better. The marriage age is delayed, customs like dowry are not easily acceptable to these women, and they stand up for themselves in the face of domestic violence. They decide when to get married, whether to get married, and how many children to have, really. So, these are empowered women to a certain extent. But again, this is a very small group, very small group. But if you talk about the slightly more lower middle class and poor women, even when they are working in the GIG and platform work, The problem is that they are experiencing, firstly, vulnerable unemployment, which means that not only do they get low wages or low salary for the work, they also have non contractual jobs, which means anytime they can lose their work. Market forces determine their job security. They have no benefits like PF account or PPF account, no banking awareness, and hardly any investment awareness because the job is very, very unproductive kind of job. At the same time, the jobs are also demanding because they are long hour jobs and they demand a lot of labor. But the real problem is even more cultural than economic. So even when women from lower middle class families or poor families begin working in the blue collar job segment, pink collar job segment, or GIG platform jobs, the real problem that they experience is firstly called as time poverty and secondly called as dual shift. What is time poverty really? Now, when women are forced to, or when they are working and earning money, no matter if it's GIG, no matter if it's a regular job. They work hard and they spend a lot of time in earning money. So, therefore, the remaining time that they have, they also are supposed to take care of their family, aged in laws or parents or the young children. So, not only do they do cooking, cleaning, and other domestic chores, but they're also making money. And hence, the time that they get for themselves is absolutely nil, it's zero. There is no extra time. No extra time to upgrade their educational or technical qualification. No. No extra time for leisure or rest, making them susceptible to depression, exploitation, and same standard of work throughout. Which also contributes to gender pay gap, which also contributes to women's investment being very lower than men. Similarly, dual shift. So she's working at home as a provider, caregiver, but at the same time she's also working in office. So which means it's kind of a dual shift or a double kind of job that she's supposed to do all the time. So these kind of problems become very, very prominent with women here. At the same time, they are also experiencing psychological problems because of this kind of exploitative nature. The violence against women and femicide is yet another issue that urban and rural women face together. You could also make this comparative analysis between urban and rural life given by Rao during 1974 when he was studying the village of Yadavpur. And here he says that in villages situated far off cities, urban employment is associated with social prestige, while agriculture or allied activity in villages is not associated with a higher prestige. Similarly, in villages which are near the industrial towns, near the factories, most people and most women who come to work here are nothing but slum dwellers who are experiencing severe social exclusion and poverty. Now, we also know that urbanization happens when cities go and expand outside, which are known as urban outgrowths. We have studied this already. So, when rural urban continuum takes place, when city expands and it includes the nearby villages into itself, also what happens, there is a complete change in the cultural life of village. This impacts women in the biggest way possible, both positive and negative. Now, Srinivas has a very interesting observation of 1962. He has linked urbanization to caste in a very different way because he says that even the migration from rural to urban was determined by caste, Brahmins being the first caste to really emigrate from villages. And hence they were the first ones to get the benefit. They were the ones who reaped the early bird advantage in terms of best of education and they occupied the most important professions. Similarly, Ames in 1954 has given the concept of money order economy, which means that most people who migrate to the urban areas are nothing but they are catering to the economic need of the family. I told you economics gives birth to culture. So the money that they make in urban areas, they send back to their village homes because automatically agriculture is not now very productive. And this is then used to clear debts, it is used to educate their children, it's used to take care of the health needs of their families, and hence the economies are very interlinked really. Rural economy or rural consumer market runs through urban money.